Next, what if someone wants to hang out with you but not get so involved?
Well, we've had a lot of people that we've had relationships with that live in other cities that have stayed for a block of time, or live in another part of the city and have a whole other group of relationships and other church experiences and so on that they're totally involved in. And there are definitely relationships where we see them possibly as a mutual exchange of building up one another and equipping, perhaps, but they're not essentially part of the local body of believers that we're a part of. That does happen from time to time, but the real question becomes, as always, the living and active Word lays bare the motives. Why are they not wanting to get so involved? If it's because of Little League and because of laziness and television and things like that, then they're going to have a hard way to go. We're not going to receive that as of Christ and not address things in their life that are flaws. We've got to somehow work through the things that belong to God and cherish the things that God has called all of His people to, and represent God as ambassadors of Christ. We've got to do that with one another, regardless of what country, what city they live in, or in the next block or in the next apartment, and they're not a part of the church that we're a part of. We need to represent Jesus to them, not in a judgmental way, not accusatory, but somehow to beg them and plead with them to see Jesus correctly and to live that out in their lives. And so it'll take different levels of relationship and responsibility. If we're going to have to give an account for their soul, Hebrews 13, then also there needs to be responsiveness on their part too. It can't be just a cursory responsibility on their part or an external one, and yet God's called us to be responsible for their soul. There has to be a mutual exchange of life and responsibility.
How do you handle people who want to join your church from other churches or cities?
It's happened quite a bit. A lot of people have moved here from other cities with the sole intention of becoming a part of this church, with or without jobs, usually without, and then found jobs and so on. So it has come up a lot of people in this city too. And yet something that we've been very desirous of holding to is pushing them back, no matter what city they're from, this one or another one, pushing them back into the relationships that they have. They don't need to be having a secret thing going on in their life where they see something great and wonderful and then sneak out the back door of 100 other relationships. It's not fair and it's not right. A man told me that at a church he was a part of, and people started leaving. It was like he was in an apartment and all of his neighbors started moving out in the middle of the night, loading up U-Hauls and moving out. And he said, "Where are you going? What are you doing?" And they say, "Hey, you'll find out. The Spirit will show you. We just have to go." And they're just naive and vague about it. Well, Jesus wasn't that way. He said to His accusers, "I did nothing in secret. I was daily in the temple. I said everything I know to say. I would have gathered you as a hen gathers her chicks, but you would not." He poured His heart and His life out. He did nothing in secret. And we would expect that of anyone from any other place, that they would lay down their life for the people in their own world and share the things that they know and who they are and the things that God's drawing them into, that they would share those things with the people around them and take responsibility for the people that God's already put in their life and not just run off to some new thing. We're not going to be that for anybody, and I hope no one else anywhere else would be that for anyone. We want them to live out their life fulfilling their responsibilities. If God has truly called them to be a part of the body of Christ here, well, we'll know soon enough. But to not fulfill our responsibility with others is lazy and selfish, and we've never tried to woo people. In fact, it's been just the opposite. There are at least 1,000 people, if I can estimate it all, that wanted to live here, that we've told over time that you need to fulfill your responsibilities.
Do your people attend other churches too?
Too is a bad word because they
That's
can't.
like, are you still beating your wife?
Right. You can't attend this church. There's nothing to attend. It's your life is given into other lives, or it's not. There's nothing to attend to be part of the church. We have a lot of people that will go out at the invitation of people in other churches. They'll will come, or individuals in those churches, or leadership of those churches in different cities that have asked us to come. As far as being a member of another church, if a person felt as if they needed to be a member of Church X on thus and such a street corner or in thus and such a city, they need to live their lives, giving their lives to the people there. And they can't really do that with them and also with us. There are so many hours in a day, period. And so as far as being a member of two different churches, it doesn't make any sense. Now ultimately, again, there would be but one church in any given city, biblically speaking. It's not even right. There's so much division in a given city. But that's a whole different subject entirely. If there is another group of believers in this city, and they're committed to being part of that church, then we want to help them be committed to that church, not divide their interests between us and them. We want to give them whatever they need to be most useful in that church, that God would help those people too. That's a fact, and there's just a lot of documentation of people that could say that's exactly what he did with me, or they did with us, or whatever, when they first came into contact with us.
Next are some miscellaneous questions. How do you get started in a fellowship of this sort?
Well, that's not something that you can just hang a sign, pick some different principles to try to adhere to, and just start from scratch. It isn't like that. It's related to the gifts of apostle, prophet, evangelist, shepherd, teacher, and the laying of foundations. There's a lot of biblical ideas that are very important to this whole thing. There are a couple booklets, The Church Prepared for the Return of Christ, that mentions this briefly. There's a whole other thing that's in tape form and soon to be in written form that's called Apostolic Foundations and Patterns, that talk about the different gifts that Jesus had. The gift that Jesus had as teacher was not appropriate to the laying of a foundation of a church, of an ecclesia. The gift of encouragement that Jesus had, or the gift of mercy that Jesus had, was not appropriate to the laying of a foundation of a local assembly. There were gifts that Jesus had that were appropriate to that, and those are the gifts that best need to be involved with our lives if that gift of being able to see the blueprint and to draw together the tradesmen and the workmen and the living stones in order to build God's house. There's certain gifts that are most appropriate to building up God's house. You can see that in Antioch when they had some wonderful things going on there from God, but they had some needs. You can see that with Philip in Samaria. Some wonderful things going on there from God, but they had some needs. And certain things needed to take place and other gifts needed to come into play in order to accomplish the tasks that God wanted accomplished. So I wouldn't really recommend going out and trying to start something to anybody. I don't think that's a biblically sound idea, nor will it be especially fruitful. But just call out to the Lord of the harvest and ask God that He would have His way in the city that you live in, and you'll know what to do. If you're obedient to Him day by day, you'll know what you need to do. You'll know what you need to do.